Hey everyone, this is Mike from Mike's Do It Yourself. Today I want to show you how to do a brake job or brake replacement on your rear brakes for a 2018 Nissan Armada. Now this will be good for the second generation Nissan Armada, and that is 2017 through the current year right now, which is 2022. So what I will be replacing is the brake rotor or the brake disc, and I will be replacing the brake pads. I'm not going to replace any of the parking brake components because in my area where I live I don't use the parking brake at all. So when I took this apart, the parking brake components looked like untouched, like they weren't even used hardly at all. So I just left those the way they were. So once you get your vehicle jacked up and on a jack stand and you take your tire off, you can get to your caliper. So what I'm doing now, I'm taking off the caliper bolts or the caliper bracket bolts. Now these are going to be 19 millimeter sockets. And so once you get that off, you're able to hang it either with a clothes hanger or put it somewhere where you know it's not going to fall down. And now this one doesn't have a screw attaching it to anything as far as the brake disc, so you're able to just wiggle the brake disc off once you get the calipers off, or the caliper off. And so what I'm not doing now is inspecting the parking brake components and the brake shoes, and they look really good. No uneven wear, no issues with those. So what I'm going to do here is just clean off everything with some brake clean and get all that brake dust out of there. So as soon as everything is cleaned up, I'm able to put a new brake disc on. Now these brake discs, they come from a company called PowerStop, and they're perfect for towing or any kind of like heavy duty use that you might have for your Armada. And these are called the Z36 PowerStop, and they come in different packages. You can get them just the brake pads, you can get the brake pads and the brake discs, you can get the brake pads, the brake discs, and the calipers. So just depending on what components you need replaced, you know, you're able to get them in different packages. And a lot of times these brake discs have a little bit of film, almost like a plastic coating on them. So you want to clean all that off, and what I'm using is just regular brake clean. And you'll want to do that on both sides. So I'm going to take off the brake disc here in just a second and clean both sides. Now what makes these brake discs better than just the normal ones, they're slotted or vented, and they're also drilled, so they provide a little bit more cooling capability over just a regular solid brake disc. And so once you get that bracket out of your caliper, there's just those two bolts to take out. You'll want to open up your master cylinder cap, and that way any excess fluid will go back to your master cylinder. And then you can push in your brake piston. And so if you have one of these tools, it comes in really handy, or some other type of C-clamp, you're able to push that piston back into the rubber boot and back into your caliper. And so when the brake piston gets about even with that rubber boot, you know that it's all the way in. And so once that's completely in, you're able to get your caliper guide pin bracket all set up with your brake pads. So you'll want to take the old ones out. And so for the power stop, they have these shims on the back side, so you won't need to put any kind of lubrication or sticky mess on the back of these shims, because they're anti-vibration, anti-rattle type of shims. And so at this point you can go ahead and clean off your bracket or just take off your hardware and put your new brake mounting clips in. And so when you put your pads back in, just make sure those clamps, those little clips there, are pushed down or where they're taut. So you can just replace both sides. And then you should have gotten your grease or some grease with your kit. And so you'll open that up, and any kind of slide point where your brake pad rides on the mounting clips, you'll just put a little bit of grease on those points. And you can put a little bit of grease on the edges or the slide points of the brake pads themselves. And so you can just clean off the back of the shim. Like I said, you're not going to be able to, or you don't need to put any kind of lubrication back there. Now these are the dust boots for the guide pins or the slide pins. And so once you get your brake pads loaded into your caliper or your caliper guide pin bracket, just be sure you have all the hardware or all the clips on the back of the brake pad in the right position. So if one side goes in a particular direction, make sure, or if it came off that way, make sure it goes on that way. And so these are the dust boots for the slide pins, and your kit should have some new ones. So you'll want to change those out. And then if your slide pins or guide pins weren't moving, then you may need to clean out that section too before putting your dust boots back in. And I would recommend just some brake clean, and then make sure it's nice and dry when you put some new grease back into it. Now I didn't have any issue with my slide pins, so I'm just going to add some more grease to each one. And you can add quite a bit more than this. That just makes sure that it will continue to slide in the future. Yeah, just make sure there's no scoring or indentations in your slide pins. Then you can put that into your caliper. Once you get that done, you may need to scoot in your brake pads just a little bit to fit into the caliper. But then when you put it over your brake disc, make sure they're out as much as possible. So once you get your caliper back on, you're able to tighten up your bolts. Now your guide pin bracket bolts are 14 millimeter socket that you will need, or 14 millimeter that you'll need to tighten that with. And those guide pin bracket bolts are going to be 24 to 32 foot-pounds. And then your caliper bracket bolts, that is going to need a 19 millimeter socket, and then that will be 155 foot-pounds of torque. And then once you get your tire back on, that will be about 100 foot-pounds. And then just do a crosswise pattern to tighten up your lug nuts. And I didn't open up any brake lines in this. So if you don't open up any brake lines, you won't need to bleed your brakes. But if you haven't done that in a while, it is a good idea to bleed all 4 brakes. And there's a bleeder screw on the back of the caliper. And there's many other videos that can show you how to bleed brakes, because there's many different ways to do it. And then once you get your tire back on, everything tightened up, you'll want to top off your master cylinder with brake fluid. And of course, tighten your cap. And just keep an eye out if you have brake 3 or dot 3 or dot 4 brake fluid. You should be able to use dot 4 for everything, but you know, that's up for debate. Well, I hope this has been helpful. This has been Mike from Mike's Do It Yourself. Good luck on your next home or automotive project. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And check out the merch store at mikesdiy.net.